Touchdown, UCLA!
With USC great and NFL stud, Frosty Rucker.
The Trojans back in front!
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's going on, Chargers fans, and welcome into the LA Football Podcast right here on the LA Football Network. We're also on the Believe Podcast Network. Rough game yesterday as the Bolts lose a tough one to the Vikings at home. We're going to get all into that. I'm going to be joined by my man, my friend, host of Chargers Unleashed, Mr. Dan Wolkenstein. What's going on, man? How you doing?
I am good, man. Although rough day like you mentioned. I am good. The sun is shining here in California. And thanks for having me on, buddy. I appreciate you having me on so it can be a healthy, therapeutic few minutes here as we go through this game that we had against the Vikings at SoFi.
Yeah, we're going to try. We're one of the more, I think, positive pair on at least Chargers Twitter. So we'll try to talk people off the ledge. Sky is not falling. There were some, concerning things, but, some things we'll try to get into and shed some positive light. LA Football Show and the LA Football Network is brought to you by our friends at MyBookie. Dan, did you do sports betting this weekend, or did you stay away from that for now?
I stayed away from it this weekend. Although, if depending on how poorly these next few weeks goes, I might be having to focus more on draft mode and sports betting than I am the Chargers games.
Well, the Chargers are a dangerous team to bet on anyway. They're a very volatile bet, but if you want to, or any team for that matter, go to mybookie.ag, use the promo code LAFB. It's going to get you you're going to double your welcome bonus. So it's free money, double it. You put in 50, you get 100 to put towards your first wager. You can parlay a bunch of different games, a bunch of NFL games, or if you want to take a risk and bet on the Chargers, be our guest. I don't know if I'd recommend that though. So, but Dan, you were there. You were at SoFi, as you are every home game. Just before we get into it, what was the atmosphere like on this one?
Atmosphere was amazing. I know there's a bunch of people that were curious about like what the turnout was going to be, Vikings fans versus Chargers fans, considering the last time Vikings traveled to LA, they kind of took over that soccer stadium. Thunder Alley was incredible. I would say it's probably like 55-45 Chargers fans to Vikings fans overall. Although I heard that on the broadcast, they wouldn't say anything about that. And all they talked about was the Vikings fans. That was probably the loudest I have heard Chargers fans get at the end of that game. But the atmosphere was electric. It was a great game to go to in terms of just like the team that was there. But in terms of what we saw on the field, there were some things about this team that were just flat out exposed.
Let's just talk about the offense, because everyone wants to jump on that and talk about Joe Lombardi and, if he should be fired already, the play calling, the lack of deep plays. I think it's more of execution. And, Herbert, love the guy. He's going to be a top 5 QB in this league for the next 15 years, but he's had a 3 or 4 game stretch here where he really hasn't played that well, if I'm just being honest. What do you think's been the biggest issue before we really dive into it? But what's been the problem with this offense really the last 4 weeks? I think they played better against the Eagles. Obviously, they got the win, but overall, it hasn't looked the same these last 4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, to be honest, it's troublesome, but it's also kind of curious because like you watch these games live, and then you go back and you watch them on film, and nothing really jumps out at you as like a huge, tremendous issue on offense, that costs this team a win. Like there aren't any like crazy costly turnovers. I mean, yes, the interception to Hendricks, like that was an amazing interception. Ball was sort of a little bit behind him, but like realistically, that's just a linebacker making a great play. And Herbert probably should throw that more out front, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thought the offensive line looked pretty good for the most part, except for maybe in that second half a little bit. They got to Justin Herbert a bit. I think I heard Daniel Popper mention this, but they just never are able to get much of a rhythm. And I don't know if it's because they're not going up tempo enough. I don't know if it's because they're just not scheming up plays correctly for mismatches, but look, like at the end of the day, if you think about like some of the biggest things that caused this team a victory on offense, I would say it would be the countless penalties that backed them up and took away touchdowns or first downs or whatever it is. I would say drop passes were another problem. I think you saw Guyton have a drop, which that one didn't really do much because they still got a first down on that drive. Mike Williams dropped a touchdown going to the end zone. That's a big deal. Eckler dropped a big one up the field. And honestly, like people talk about like the lack of deep shots, and I saw people talk about this on Twitter, and I went back and watched the film.
Every week, people bring it up.
I watched this. I went back and watched the game on film to see, like, okay, I know there weren't deep shots technically, but like, were there attempts at deep shots? And I think there were at least 3, I think 4, that were supposed to be drawn up as deep plays that got blown up or were just covered. There was one that was a deep play, got blown up, ended up being a sack. One was a deep play that ended up being a pass interference. Another one was a deep play that ended up having to get checked down. I believe there was one more. And so, unfortunately, the deep plays that you drew up, they just didn't turn into those 70-yard catches. Like they were 50 or 40 or 30. And so I don't think it's a lack of the call that was being played. So and you go back and watch the game, and this is the thing that's tough to admit, is like the Chargers offense really wasn't that bad, except for the fact that they just did not capitalize at the most important times. You finally get a touchdown. You're up 4. Your defense gets a 3 and out. And you get a 3 and out. Like the ball, like the game is in your hands at this point, and you do nothing. End of the game, same thing. The end of the first half, same thing. It's just the Chargers never really were able to capitalize and have that rhythm and that momentum, aside from maybe 3 minutes when they ended up going up 4 in that third quarter.
Yeah, and going back to the big plays, because this was always drives me crazy in general when people accuse or bring this up, because they'll either, some won't even watch the game. They'll just look at the stat and see like, oh, there was no 20+ yard plays. Some will look at, there was a guy on Twitter. I think everyone has, it's funny. This guy, he covers the Broncos for a site, and he put up the passing chart for Herbert and basically just said like, wow, this is how you're going to call a game with Herbert as your quarterback. And it like blew it. Like if you go to his Twitter, I don't want to call this guy out and make it sound bad, but if you go to his Twitter, he's a Broncos guy. He's got a good following, but his tweet interactions are, like 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 likes here and there. This one about the Chargers just blew up because everyone going in on it because everyone's angry about Lombardi and what to do. But it's a very misleading chart because, like you said, there were plays drawn up. They just weren't taken. And so you can't accuse the play caller of not calling aggressive plays if the defense is running too high shell to not allow it. I mean, why do you think everyone Mahomes all of a sudden
there are 2 teams in a game.
Yeah. And everyone this year, all of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been the Patrick Mahomes we all know. Last night, he looked a lot better, but he hasn't been as great because defenses have been scheming too high shells so they don't give up the deep ball against him, and he hasn't been able to do it. It's not that they're not drawing it up. It's just defenses schematically are not allowing them to do that. They want you to dink and dunk. They're kind of adopting the Staley defense, which originally was the Fangio defense. And teams are doing that against the Chargers this year. And whether it's they're playing a defense or Herbert's just not going for it and he's checking down, it's a combination of things, but people have to look at the whole picture and not just say, well, they didn't throw any deep, so that must be the play call, fire the guy. I mean, I see people calling for Shane Steichen again. I'm like, you guys not remember last year? I wasn't off on Shane Steichen like a lot of people were, but I don't think we've got to that point where Lombardi's so bad that we should go back to last year. Like, what are people talking about?
No, and I'll say this, like as much as people want to get on the offense and they want to criticize, the drops and Justin Herbert or, head coaching for not going on a certain 4th down or 2, like this game really this wasn't one of those games where you saw like these crazy, those make or break plays on offense anyways, that cost you a game. Like I think the Chargers for the most part played a fairly conservative game on offense, but they did put up shot plays when they tried to. There was one 4th down, I believe, where they could have gone for it at the end of the first half. I get why they didn't. There's about like 40 seconds left. I think it was 4th
try
and
to drive
2
him
or
off sides or whatever.
Yeah. I wouldn't have been surprised if they went for it there. But again, like it's okay to not go for it every 4th down. Like it's fine. Unfortunately, like I think the demise of this team was less about the offense in terms of like specific plays. They just couldn't get momentum. They couldn't stay on the field. The defense on the other part, they honestly played pretty well, but there were a couple people that just had really bad games. The secondary needs more depth. Again, you're relying on your 3rd string corner, 4th-string corner in theory to be covering like offensive potential rookie of the year last year. Adam Thielen, these guys are stud wide receivers, and you're expecting 3rd and 4th-string corners to be able to get them with guys like Nazir Adderley and Mike Davis both not playing. So offense, honestly, like I really wasn't that disappointed, other than just like they couldn't get anything going. And I think there are ways that you can manufacture that. Like I think you can go up tempo, you can kind of get guys in space, you can set in some screens, do things like that. They just kind of were in mud, it felt like, for most of the game.
Well, that's a good way to put it. And again, not trying to just like jump down fans' throat, but we're in a culture nowadays, especially in sports, where everyone there needs to be someone to blame. Like someone's to blame for something going wrong. And sometimes in sports, you just get beat. And yes, the Chargers offense was not prolific, was not dynamic, didn't have that that we've seen, but it wasn't like egregious play calling, horrible execution, mistake. It was just, they couldn't quite get the thing churning, but they just got beat. The Vikings just played better. And sometimes it's as simple as the other team just executing better than your team. And it's not because someone was so bad at their job or needs to be fired or this. Now, if that happens over the course of 17 games, then yeah, that's when it's like, okay, now this is a constant thing that we're getting beat every week. And it's because we're not doing things, we're not adjusting things. But they just won last week. I know it's a bad stretch. And I know that there are things that need to be adjusted, which we're going to get to a little bit more too. But overall, I would not look at this game and say, this is the same old Chargers. This is that. They got beat by a Vikings team who, last thing, this Vikings team I did in my preview show had Matthew Collar, who covers the Vikings.
Good, man.
Every game they've lost by one. This is like the Chargers of last year. Like they're a good team. They've lost every game by one possession.
They were the best 3-5 team that I think was in the league.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a stat that going into this week, they had at one point led every single game by at least a touchdown. And most of those games they lost. So they were like the 2020 Chargers. And then they just happened to win this one. So they're a good football team. They just, and they showed it, I think.
Yeah. And I don't know if people are willing to admit this yet. And trust me, like I'm usually like the more optimistic person on Twitter and this fan base and kind of covering the team. But honestly, like I think you just have to accept the reality that in this game, their best players made plays and played better than our best players. And
Kirk Cousins played better than Justin Herbert. Let's just say it as it was.
And we'll get into this in a bit, but there were some star players on their team that made key plays at key times, and our star players did not. Period. And they took advantage of it. And sure, you can blame coaching a little bit for not being able to kind of like scheme up and kind of put on different, matchups and stuff. But like, there's a second team out there and they did the same thing. And to me, as much as like they got beat. And unfortunately, we were exposed in some very crucial areas and went up against a team who had strengths that were going up against our weaknesses and got called out.
And you made a great point there that I'll end this, and then let's jump into defense a little bit. But if there's anything to take away from this podcast, after this game, I think it's this, and you said it. If you're getting blown out or losing big, then you have a coaching issue. And there's something in preparation, in scheming, and something that's going wrong. The majority of the time, obviously it can come down to a few factors, but majority, specifically in this game, if you're losing by one score, typically that means, like you said, one team's star players are making more plays than the other team's star players. And that's what happened yesterday. And I think Justin Jefferson, who many argued should have been the rookie of the year last year. I don't. Justin Herbert absolutely deserved it, but Justin Jefferson had a phenomenal season, is one of the best young receivers in this game, and he showed it yesterday. Now, let me ask you this, because he was just picking on Tevon Campbell, and it's not fair. I see people saying, like, Tevon Campbell needs to be off the team, cut him. Tevon Campbell has no business covering Justin Jefferson. He's just not that skilled of a player. Doesn't mean he should be off the team or shouldn't be. Is a depth piece. He wasn't expected to be starting this week against.
He's your fourth, third string at best quarterback. Yeah.
And he got beat bad. I'm not making an excuse for him, but to say like it's not like it was our star corner just getting burned left and right. He should not be covering him. So let me ask you this: A, do you put that on coaching that they somehow still had Campbell going up against Jefferson? Or do you see it more as Clint Kubiak and the Vikings staff drawing things up where they were able to get that mismatch anytime they wanted it?
The latter, because so at the beginning, I'm thinking like, man, like Jefferson is just cooking Campbell, which like, if we're being honest, he did. And again, it's not fair. It's not fair to expect Campbell to ball out against Justin Jefferson. Like that's just a mismatch. You saw the coaches make adjustments. You see Chris Harris on Justin Jefferson, and Chris Harris ends up getting beat for a first down on one of those for Justin Jefferson. And then you see Adam Thielen, same thing. Like both Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are both stud wide receivers. And you saw matchups with Tavon Campbell on both of those two receivers often. It wasn't just Justin Jefferson. I want to say there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe at least 5, maybe 6 times where there was a long reception by either Jefferson or Thielen directly on Campbell, including that third and 20 at the end of the game. There's that third and 6, I think like 2:40 something left. That was Campbell on Jefferson, but the last one was Thielen on Jefferson. Was Campbell on Thielen. So I think they knew that Campbell was their out, and you trust Thielen. I mean, I would, if I was their coach, I would trust both Thielen and Jefferson to beat him every time. I'd take that matchup all day.
Sometimes you just don't have the horses, and it'd be dumb of an offensive coordinator to not go after and try to expose that guy. And we could really dive into this, which we don't have the time for right now, and I haven't done enough film of this game yet to do that. But we could dive into this and really look at how schematically could Staley and the Chargers defense have changed that? Could they have doubled certain situations? Could they run more dime? I'm sure there was different ways if they really peel it back. But in a vacuum, sometimes it's just hats off to them for finding the weakness and exposing it. And it still wasn't like they put up 40 points. The Chargers overall, the defense played very well. It was just in inopportune times, the Viking star players made plays. And the biggest one was that third and 20.
At the worst time or best time, depending on which fan base you are, the Chargers defense or offense made inopportune plays, and the Vikings capitalized, whether it's because of play calling or just because players. Like, you're getting 3rd and 15s converted with Jefferson. Yeah. You're getting 3rd and 20s converted. You've got like it at some point, like, I think, people talk about, this exploited Campbell. Like, I don't think it's about Campbell as much as it is when Mike Davis isn't playing, Nazir Adderley isn't playing. Like,
or a depth issue.
It's a depth issue. And can you expect Campbell, who's your 3rd string corner, probably 4th, to be able to cover Justin freaking Jefferson or Adam Thielen? Like, no. And Chris Harris, I like Chris Harris, but he's not an outside guy.
Yeah.
And he can't cover 2 guys at once, even if he is.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it was just Justin Jefferson that beat us. It was, but again, like, I think people, it's one of those things where, like, people lack perspective sometimes, and they get caught up in the moment, both good and bad. And this team's 4-1. Oh my gosh, we're going to the Super Bowl, best team in the AFC. Then fast forward, we need to fire everyone. This team's horrible. Bring back Anthony Lynn. That's not necessarily what everybody's saying, but like, people go to extremes. Yeah. And if you think back to what people were realistically hoping and expecting from this team going into the season, improvement from 2020, playoff berth. If we can get a playoff win, gravy. Like, that's basically what people thought of as this team. Now, 9-10 weeks in, you're upset because the team looks like it's like made some regressions. Like, I'm sorry, but like, that's the ebbs and flows of the NFL. Like, it's a make or break league. It's a mismatch league. Yeah. And you went up against a Vikings team that had guys that were far better than the guys you did at positions that you were hurt at. Like, what could they have done differently? They don't have another Asante Samuel Jr. They just don't.
Washington just beat Tampa Bay last week. I don't think Tampa Bay, the sky is falling for them. It's a matchup league any given Sunday. Let's dig into that a little bit deeper before we wrap this up, though, because there is a depth issue. We all agree on that, whether we're trying to put a positive spin on things or not. We agree that there's a depth issue specifically in the secondary. is that, and I know a lot of people are getting really critical of Brandon Staley, which is fine. He's the head coach. I still think he's one of the great young coaches.
Okay, real quick, is it a depth issue though? Like, is it an issue, or is it you got secondary guys that are hurt and you got stuck going up against a superior receiving core?
Well, that's what I was going to get to. So is it truly so that we're on what we had Mike Davis out? Santos Samuel Jr. didn't practice all week because he was in the concussion protocol and finally got cleared. So he did play, but he wasn't like ready, if you will, or didn't really practice much. Tavon Campbell, you're missing Mark Wibb, Nasser Adderley. So the question is then, is it a depth issue? Like, did this team go into the year just expecting to be healthy and they were confident with that health? Or let me phrase this correctly. Should they have done a better job as CB 3 and 4 than they came into the year having? I guess that's the question I should ask.
I mean, I don't think you could have enough secondary, especially in a Brandon Staley defense. So sure, I think they could have had more guys in the secondary. But again, remember, like, going back to this roster with all the cuts, like, who were we going to be cutting? And people were going back like, oh, they should have let go of Easton Stick so they could have kept like Tyron Johnson. Like, do you think they were going to keep both Tyron Johnson and the corner over Easton Stick? Like, it's hard. This roster is good for a reason. Now, if there's two areas that I think they are weakest at in depth, it would probably be secondary and interior defensive line. Like, those are the two spots. Sure, you can talk about offensive line all the time, but like, those are probably the two spots that are biggest. I don't necessarily know if it's like an issue that they could really do anything more about. I mean, I don't think anybody was thinking, oh, we need to sign another corner. Like, everyone, if Asante Samuel Jr. can be Asante Samuel Jr. that we expect, like, this team's pretty darn good. And we saw that. Mm-hmm. But when he's not playing, and when you're out also Nazir Adderley, and when you're also out Mike Davis, like, you're going to get a drop off. And unfortunately, you're going up against two arguably top 10 wide receivers on the same team and Dalvin Cook. Like, there's only so much you could do. So the offense could have done more, but I don't know if it's really a depth issue as much as it is at the point of season where those spots are thin due to injury, and we just got beat by a superior core of wide receivers. And it's unfortunate. Like, I felt bad, honestly. I felt bad because I saw a few teammates of the Chargers kind of tweeting out subliminally, like, wins the team, loses the team, we'll get back, we're sorry, Bolt fam. Like, after rewatching the game, it did feel like there were like specific players that got targeted and cost this team a victory. Mm-hmm. Is it that person or that player's fault? I don't know. But like, I think that's what they mean. Like, you win and lose as a team. And could the team together have done more? Yes. But I do think that there were some specific players at specific times who cost this team a victory. But again, like, you got to give, and I want to make sure that we are fair here. You have to give the Vikings credit. Like, they came in, they had a game plan, and they made plays when they had to. Like, you can talk all you want about coaching and all this kind of stuff. Name me a Charger that made key plays at key points of the game when it mattered. Like, in the second half, who was it? You had Keenan Allen catch one great catch from a great throw from Justin Herbert. But then, like, right afterwards, 3 and out.
No, that's a perfect point, because someone that we need to talk about before we wrap this up, Mike Williams, who I love, I know you love, I know the fan base loves, was absolutely killing it the first, 5 weeks of the season, putting up crazy numbers. Everyone's like, man, I know we're paying him a lot, but he's worth it. We're bringing this guy back.
Blank check.
Basically has disappeared basically since the bye. So I'll phrase the question kind of in a similar way again. How much of that is schematically? How much is that him? I mean, he's dropped some passes, obviously. And how much is that just Justin Herbert not finding him, do you think?
It's a good question. For example, I think was it last week, the week before, where he could have had like a 70-something yard touchdown pass, but I think Justin Herbert just missed through it. Yesterday, he had the drop pass that was probably 6. There's been some kind of pass interferences that have happened that have been in place of Mike Williams catches. But like, I think Brandon Staley mentioned it today in press conference that like there is nothing in terms of like injuries that's holding him back. It's not that anything's been bothering him to the point where it's affecting his play. I think some of it is probably, I think some of a defensive scheme adjustment of the opponents that we're going up against.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is just like Keenan Allen had a couple of weeks where he didn't have many catches and people thought Keenan Allen was lost when Mike Williams was doing great. And all of a sudden Mike Williams is better than Keenan Allen. And now it's kind of flipped.
Yep.
Like that's what happens with the receivers. Like
Yep.
it's just, Mike Williams didn't do nothing, but I think it's just, you're so spoiled with what we saw the first few weeks that when you don't see it every time, you're kind of like, oh man, like I wonder if it's, but I don't think it's an issue. I think it's more of an issue of a rhythm and a flow than it is of a player issue. And who's to blame? I mean, it's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, I think it's a little bit of all of them, but at the same time, I do think that they can do more to get this offense comfortable. And you can't really blame the offensive line, really. I know there were a couple kind of miscommunications with the running backs trying to help chipping and stuff that led to some kind of wide open blitzes and hits on Herbert for sacks. But I think it's the offense kind of just feels like it's kind of stuck in mud a little bit. And you're waiting for like that one. All right, Herbert gets that 50-yard throw and bam, we're back in this. Yeah. And they just haven't had it. It just seems like they've been kind of not suffocated, but kind of like suppressed a bit. And I don't think that's a Lombardi issue. Like, I really don't. I just think some guys just aren't executing. Like, Jalen Guy needs to catch a pass. Austin Eckler needs to catch a pass. Keenan Allen needs to catch all those passes. Like, Herbert needs to make those throws. And you're accustomed to seeing those things happen. So when they don't, it's tough to watch sometimes. And that game, it was tough to watch live. Honestly, I think it looked worse live than it did back when I rewatched it on tape.
Okay.
If you go back and watch the game and just watch it through, like there really aren't many, like the plays that you're like, dude, I cannot believe that happened. Almost all of them were on defense. Almost all of them were from wide receivers, except for the one Dalvin Cook, I want to say screenplay or something that he made like 5 people miss and Kenneth Murray missed a tackle.
Yeah. That's a bad one.
But like even that one, like that wasn't a backbreaking play. They got a field goal out of it or something. Like those aren't the things that cost you the game. But like 3rd and 20, you're giving up 25 yards. That costs you. Like, and there's a lot of those that happened on the defensive side. And at the end of the day, like when you had to have it, this is a 1-score game. When you had to have it, last drive, you had 2 times where it was 1st and 2nd and 20, and then they ended up getting that converted. And then it was 1st and 25. 3rd and 20 that you're giving up 18 yards to allow them to go for it on 4th down.
Yeah.
You're not going to win when your defense has 2 opportunities like that. You can't hold an opponent at 2nd and 20 plus.
Yep.
Like,
can't have it.
Can't
have it. So how do we fix it, Dan? How do we get this team back on track? You kind of alluded to it, answering it there, just, better execution. I want to see running the football more. They only ran the football like 16 times, with the running backs yesterday. And they're really in that big of a hole.
I'm not even, so if I'm Brandon Staley, I don't really see much effectiveness in the run game aside from Austin Eckler. And because of that, like what I would like to see on offense, and I'll get to the defense, but on offense, I want to see the Chargers do more of expanding their run play, quote unquote, to include passing plays. Like give them some shovel plays, give them some kind of like wide receiver screens with the correct wide receivers running it. Like do some of those tight end shovel passes, do some of those little shovel passes to Austin Eckler at the line of scrimmage, bring in Andre Roberts, like bring in some of those miscommunication that makes defenses have to guess more than just like running up the middle or running outside on 3rd and 1. Like kind of get more creative there. That's probably what I would do on offense. And then obviously the rhythm thing, like go no huddle, get tempo going.
And so that is something schematically that Lombardi, I think, can improve on. So that is our critique that, I agree. I mean, Staley obviously wasn't the offensive coordinator, but he was with the Rams last year, and the Rams run like freaking screens and jet sweeps more than any team in the NFL. Like, I think I want to see the Chargers team do that a little bit. Like, I know they've adapted this New Orleans Saints offense, but you can still throw some different wrinkles in there to keep teams guessing. And I think that would help. So I think that would be our one critique on Lombardi. He's not god awful, but you can still critique and improve. And I think that would help. Simple things like that, where you're at least, sometimes those don't work, but sometimes they start a rhythm. You get that one bubble screen that goes for 6 yards. Okay. You got a ball in a receiver's hands and maybe didn't get it the previous 2 games, like a Jalen Guyton. You run a jet sweep with one of your receivers. It gets the ball in the receiver's hands, get him feeling confident, get Josh Palmer going, use his side and speed around the edge in some ways you wouldn't use him before. So I think things like that, I agree with you 100%. If they were to implement things like that in the offense, I think it'd go a long way in just setting some things up and getting him in a rhythm, which is most important.
Yeah. So that's the offensive side. On the defensive side, I honestly, again, going back and watching that game a second time, you'll see pressures. I thought the defense actually did a pretty good job. I thought their front seven, honestly, looked pretty darn good. The secondary just got roasted.
Yeah.
That game. So
Jerry Tillery played well. Nwosu had his best game of the season.
Yep. Nwosu looked good. Kaiser White looked great again. Derwin James, the only one that looked like he belonged out there in the secondary. Although even him, he missed a couple of plays. He had a surefire interception at the end of that game that should have, or towards the end of the game in the end zone, that ended up being, I want to say it was a field goal. In my opinion, it's all in the secondary. And again, a huge part of that is who are the dudes that are back there? And you need some of your guys to get healthy. Is Mike Davis a top 10 corner in the league? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. But is he a CB1? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you're down your CB1, and when you're down your safety 2, and arguably safety 4, and Ryan Smith is gone, your special teams isn't doing great, which we didn't even talk about, but special teams need to improve too. On defense, you got to be able to, at some point, you have to make them to beat you a different way.
Yeah.
And people want to criticize the Chargers' run defense, but I would rather see what I saw this last game, where at the end of the day, they're having their star players having to make star plays against Tavon Campbell. I'd rather have that be the thing that ends up beating us than the 3rd and 7 run up the middles, the 3rd and 4 run up the middles, just getting gashed every single time. 1st and 10 ends up being 2nd and 3. I think the team adjusted and played well defensively from the run perspective.
Yeah, they held Dalvin Cook at 3.9 yards per carry. Finished with 94 yards, which some will say, well, 94 is too many. It's Dalvin Cook's one of the best running backs in the game. You hold him to 3.9 yards per carry. That's what I care more about, is the per carry.
Yep.
Took him 25. It would have taken him 30 carries to get to 100 yards. That's the run defense played fine yesterday.
So that's kind of what I would say for the defensive side. But overall, I think the thing that's hard is, you mentioned it earlier, at the end of the day, it's hard to just accept the fact that you just got beat and their players made better plays than your players did at the most important times. And as a coach, I'm frustrated if I'm, Ronaldo Hill. I've got all the guys in the right positions with the guys that I have. I'm doing everything I can to possibly make this team win. And Tavon Campbell isn't turning his head around. Or the other guy is Adam Thielen. What am I supposed to do? Yeah. There's only so much you can do. Or my guys running into each other in the end zone. Or
where you jump off
people aren't
sides.
Communicating. I think there's a Alohi Gilman, Chris Harris thing, where Chris Harris doesn't go up and help, and all of a sudden Alohi Gilman doesn't make the right read, and all of a sudden, I think it was Justin Jefferson or Thielen ends up with the first down critical. People are blasting Chris Harris. I'm frustrated as a coach because I have my guys in the position. So defensively, I think it's more of a personnel issue than it is a coaching issue, because you can see they're in the players are in the right position. And you put Jalen Ramsey in the exact same position as Tavon Campbell, I guarantee you this is a different outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. And that's what they need. They just need some different horses at this point and get guys back healthy, but they'll be okay. They're 5-4. They got beat by a solid Vikings team, even though they're 4-5 now. They're a good team. They've had their same systems in place for a long time. Kirk Cousins, no matter what you say about him, is a solid quarterback. He plays solid. He's not a superstar by any means, but
good enough.
He played better than Justin Herbert yesterday. That's what it comes down to. When you have 1-score games, your star players need to make plays, and Kirk Cousins made more plays than Justin Herbert. Justin Jefferson made more plays than Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. That's just simply what it comes down to. Could there be better calls? Sure. But it comes down to the coaches say all the time too. It comes down to who makes more plays in their team. It sounds stupid to say, but it's true. It's not all about this beautifully schematic game plan, which is a part of the formula, but sometimes it's just about who makes one more play than the other guy. And the Vikings did that yesterday. So you take that, you go back to practice this week, you get after it, and you get ready for a TJ Wattless Pittsburgh Steelers team on Sunday Night Football. It is still a good team, well coached. Not sure if Big Ben will play. I think he'll probably be cleared by then. I would assume so.
I would think.
Yeah, I would think. So, we'll get into that throughout the whole week, but they got to put this one behind them, have a good week of practice, and get ready for another primetime matchup that I don't like saying this, but let's be real. There's going to be a lot of Steelers fans there, so it's going to be really loud, travel really well, but it's going to be a fun game.
I'll be there. I'm excited. I'm pumped.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of that, before we log off and before you get your final thought in, Dan, next week, Golden Road Brewery, it's a night game. So before the game, we will be at Golden Road in Los Angeles. I'll have the link and the address in the description, doing a live show. I will be there. Dan Wolkenstein will be there. We'll have the director there. For those of you that watch his channel on YouTube, he's going to be joining us for this live show. Free beer. We're hanging out all day, and then a bunch of people going to the game afterwards. So please come hang out, say what up to us. Let us get you a free Golden Road beer, and we'll do a live show there, have a lot of fun. So looking forward to it, Dan. It's going to be fun.
I'm excited for that, man. We'll have some giveaways, got some special guests coming. We mentioned the director, got some other things potentially happening, but we'll see. But yeah, come out, hang out with us, have some fun. And then if you're going to the game, or if you're not going to the game, get some tickets, check them out. But yeah, come to Golden Roads, come hang out with us, come say hi, and drink some libations with us. And look, we got to end this, I feel like, on some positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chargers didn't miss a kick yesterday.
Yeah. Dustin Hopkins, baby.
Yeah, Andre Roberts looked pretty good. There were a couple plays that weren't going, but there were some where like, look, he could break this.
Yeah, it's got some juice.
The Chargers are still 5-4.
Yeah,
like, clearly in the playoff hunt. I think they're a half game behind the AFC West right now. Like,
yep,
it's not all like a thunderstorms and lightning here in a bad way. Like, I get this was a frustrating loss, but stop it with the same old Chargers thing, because this was not a same old Chargers type loss. Like, this was not one of those kinds of games. This was just you were vulnerable at a couple positions, and they took advantage of it. And their guys outperformed your guys.
Yep.
And you're going to have some of those games, and you just have to be able to accept that and then move on. And I think the team will. And I think you saw a lot of that from the press conferences both yesterday and today, where I think the team is kind of like, stay the course. We're okay. Let's get our guys back. And they know, like, the coaching staff and these players aren't blind to either. And so you want to win, lose as a team, but you also want to, self-correct. And whatever that means, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some movement in the secondary this week, either if folks getting healthy, bring them back, or potentially bringing in some guys on either the practice squad or some free agents, who knows. Yeah. But if we don't get Mike Davis and Nazir Adderley back, I think we'll see new people, new faces on this team in the secondary.
Yeah, I think you'll have to at that point start plucking some practice squad guys from other teams, with the trade deadline being gone. So that's not an option anymore. So yeah. And last thing I'll say, and then we're putting a pin in this week and moving on to the Steelers, but most of the chatter of upsetness with coaching staff has to do with Joe Lombardi, but I have seen some craziness out there about firing Brandon Staley. And I'm just going to say, and I'm always polite and nice, but shut the hell up. You do not know how good you have it. If you were to move on from a coach like Brandon Staley, then you're just not watching football, or you just don't watch other football. So the only negative thing I'm going to say towards people, shut up. There is absolutely no merit to anyone saying fire Brandon Staley, because that old saying, you don't know how good you have it till it's gone. You would realize that very quickly if you move on from Staley, which isn't going to happen anyway. He's going to be here for quite some time. So it's not going to happen regardless, but just stop putting it out there. It's just silly.
Nope. I agree. There's not a chance in hell that it is at all remotely his fault. I mean, he'll take the blame. I think at the end of the day, it's his leadership. He'll take it.
Yeah.
But
and there's some things that are his blame, of course.
He'll take fault and criticism for certain things, but is he the reason that the team lost yesterday? No. It was fine. Fine coach game. So and people that want to argue that are literally, picking straws or whatever that saying goes. Like, I don't know. They've watched less football than the little one on your shoulder. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
exactly. So yeah, for those watching, if you're wondering why there's a baby with me now and there wasn't pre-show, she was napping and woke up, so we had to pick her up. But I think she's like asleep now, or what? She's been silent this entire time. I've been impressed.
She's been
So
good, man. The background noise is almost like none.
yeah, I know. It's just her breathing.
Good for
Literally,
her.
I think she may have like knocked out, or she's just creepily.
I
But
think it's
I
I
try
think it's her father's voice is so soothing, Ryan.
soothing, I guess. I just put people to sleep, like Delilah on The Wave.
The baby whisperer, man.
I will say too, this lighting, I kind of liked in the beginning. I don't know if I like it so much now. I think I needed more light. I wanted to go with the ominous kind of dark glow, but now I think it looks better with more lighting.
It's
So
more
the
like
future
a
will know.
Nightmare Before Christmas, which, hey,
Yeah,
maybe
get
that
the tree in the background.
Vikings game was the nightmare before our Christmas, which is beating the Steelers. Who knows?
There you go. Great way to end it. So Dan Wolkenstein, Chargers Unleashed. This is the LA Football Show. I'm Ryan Dyrud. Please, I hope we see you guys all at Golden Road next week. We'll be doing stuff, previewing this game all week on Chargers Unleashed on the LA Football Network. Plenty of stuff there. So Dan, appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much, my man.
Of course. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk to you guys soon.